Hey, what up, Long Beach? Welcome back to another episode of LBST, where, like Frank Reynolds on the road to a charity event, or those cannibals in Game of Thrones that I can never remember their name, we have a belly full of crow, and we're ready for this episode. As always, I am co-sports editor JJ Fiddler, to my right.
Co-sports editor Mike Gardabasio, belly full of garlic knots, and to my right,
I've got a metaphorical long ponytail in Dothraki tradition. I'm Tyler Hendrickson, and yes, full disclosure, we got down on some of those garlic knots at Papalucci's. We want to thank them and Naples Rib Company sponsoring this show and pretty much everything we do at GazetteSports.com and the Press Telegram.
and literally fueling my afternoon on this lovely day.
Facts only.
Well, we've got some humble pie we can eat too, because last week we made some predictions, and oh boy, let's just say that if we went to Vegas and played Flight of Fancy here, those games were on the board, and we made some bets, we'd be walking home. Or possibly hitchhiking
We would
home.
not have hit any teasers, that's for sure. Yeah.
Tear in my beer moment, candidly. It was kind of rough for the local teams, to be honest. They really dropped like flies last weekend.
And we're not even talking just football. We're talking across the board. Volleyball, water polo. I mean, everybody really took it on the chin in the local Long Beach area.
Well, consider that if Poly football does not win this Friday, it'll be the first time in at least a decade that no Moore League team in any sport makes it to the semifinals in the fall.
Which is crazy. And you've also got all these other teams looking like La Mirada and Dominguez in those CIF's playoff football brackets, where I think we all thought, let's say, again, Flight of Fancy, if you were going to play a teaser, those would definitely be the types of games you would have put up front, just because of how impressive they looked throughout the season. And it really looked like those teams were peaking at the right times.
We took it for granted. We weren't even thinking about La Mirada losing, to be completely honest.
Or Dominguez.
Yeah, well, Dominguez, they were playing the defending CIF champion on the road. But La Mirada was a 2 seed at home against a team that had been moved up divisions. Salesian, obviously a great program, but we were thinking, La Mirada's so good, they got so many playmakers, they're at home, they'll be fine. You never think a 2 seed's going to lose.
Well,
and then LaSalle, we were talking about how
LaSalle, yeah.
they should have been seeded and they didn't get any respect. And then they got kind of dealt with at home, which really shocked all of us.
More than kind of.
They really
Brutal,
set the week off wrong or right, whichever way you look at it. But I mean, like
Dominguez
Dominguez.
find out that La Mirada had lost
Until I got home.
No, until like halfway through Friday night, because we were just all working, and you're like, La Mirada won, right? And
I still couldn't get over the fact that Dominguez had lost. And the reason why I brought up Dominguez is that the one week they go from playing for another league title.
No, it would have been
third.
Would have been fourth.
Fourth straight, and then next week they're done. They could have been a league champion, and all of a sudden they're sitting at home watching the second week. They don't even get to sniff Thanksgiving practice.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes in the playoffs, man. You got to be ready every week, and you just can't take things for granted.
So
and we do have some great teams left.
Is it us?
Let's say that.
Is it us? Did we just totally whiff? Are we that wrong?
No. I mean, I think that there were legitimately like surprising upsets, which happen particularly in football sometimes. I mean, like I still kind of would stand by what we said about LaSalle football. To be completely honest, they're still unbelievably talented for their division, but especially in football, there's really almost no such thing as a perfect high school football team, and they hit a
couple turnovers, couple injuries, all at the wrong time.
couple
Bing
mistakes,
bang boom.
but then the injuries I think exposed a legitimate position where they weren't deep enough to make a playoff run and sustain those injuries. But again, it's like, if those kids don't get injured and the ball bounces a couple of different ways, they potentially win that game by the same score. Do you know what I mean?
Let's say this: did we not see across the board in all divisions for the local Long Beach area teams a lack of depth this year? No matter the sport, no matter what school we're talking about, all across the board we saw a lack of depth. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think we definitely saw thinner teams. I think as the private schools are sort of bulking up a little bit, we're seeing that most of our high schools are public schools, and they're a little thinner. Bosco's not particularly thin, and they are still cruising in the playoffs as the top seed, as an example. And so I think that could be part of it. I think specifically LaSalle and some of those lower divisions, you sort of are reliant on a handful of guys.
Yeah.
And if a couple of those guys get hurt, it really changes the dynamic of your team.
Well, even at Poly, to be completely honest, and this is obviously a thought going into the Crespi game, they're not really like jam-packed with linebackers. If some starters aren't able to finish the game against Crespi, at receiver and secondary, they've certainly got the guys. But I think, like, if you look at line depth in the Long Beach area outside of Bosco,
that's exactly what I was going to say. I got to start talking louder over you guys.
You don't have a whole lot. You don't have a whole lot.
I mean, look, not just the Long Beach guys. I mean, everywhere, man. Lines are just smaller everywhere.
Not Bosco.
Thank you.
If you look at we were laughing about this with their athletic director Monty McDermott at bracket day. He said I forget the exact measurements on his son, but he said he was like 6'4", like 200 something pounds as a freshman, and that he was like the second smallest guy on Bosco's freshman line. You know what I mean? Like, and it all starts there with them. I think he correctly pointed out Sean McGrew has been the beneficiary of a lot of great offensive line play there. But yeah, they're in that position. You know, they lost a Division I lineman this year and did not miss a beat. I think if you lose, say, JoJo, if you lose a Division I lineman at any other school we cover, you would have noticed that a lot more over the course of the year.
Right, and that guy is, like, playing at USC right now and playing a lot, so he's pretty good. And we're talking about Damian Mama, the big boy.
No, I was saying, they had a guy that was going to be on this year's team, and Eric Golston Jr., who goes out. You know what I mean? They lost talent and were able to replace him, or as Polly.
So you're not even talking about the guy that departed. You're talking about the guy that
they had a guy that they expected to have this year, they didn't have. And I think, again, if you were to see that kind of an injury at any school, I mean, look at, Norwalk when they had a lineman go down in the Bellflower game that I covered. It really showed that the kid went down. Bosco's got that line depth, but JJ, you're right. I mean, outside of them, not a ton of depth. We saw that with Lakewood volleyball. They had one of their top two players had a tough night against Corona Del Mar. You're not just stocked with Division I players to sub in there,
No, you are not. I've watched multiple playoff teams, and what are we in the second week of playoffs? I watched multiple playoff teams go full wholesale changes. Corona Del Mar did a wholesale change in the second half against Wilson in boys water polo at the Belmont a couple days ago. That's crazy.
Wilson's response
You're the same seven guys in the pool.
That.
Exactly, because you can't. You're the same seven guys in the pool, and then all of a sudden you're basically playing an entirely different team. I watched Kentucky do that against Kansas last night in college basketball. It's like, we have to beat another team full of 6'4" dudes. Depth is very, very important in high school, and we forget about it sometimes,
The joke on the Kentucky game was like, they're going to go to the end of the bench and start subbing in their McDonald's All-Americans.
Yeah, that's real tough for them. Question that I think we asked a lot when none of us have children. Now, obviously, Mike has little Vinny. If you had a son or a daughter who could go to a school like Bosco and play, maybe not start outright, but play, would you rather, speaking of depth, send a kid to a higher level school where they weren't guaranteed to start, so they were kind of in the middle there, not necessarily a private school, but you know what I mean, a big-time program. Yeah. Would you send your kid to a big-time program to fight for that starting position, or would you send your kid to a smaller place where, like we said, depth is an issue, where they could kind of get in and get going and maybe have a more fulfilled high school sports experience?
Growing up in Long Beach and the culture in Long Beach, to me, it's if you want your kid to be great at something, you put them in competition, and that way if they play, you know that they earned it and that they're one of the best, and if they don't, then it's still part of the, if you're on the Bosco, if you're a backup on the Bosco football team or the Poly girls basketball team, it's still a rewarding part of your high school experience to get garbage time minutes during a state championship season. Do you know what I mean? It's different.
Well, it's so different now because people don't play for their hometown as much anymore. You really do get to choose your school going from middle school to high school, so there's less of that hometown pride.
They don't play for their neighborhood. In the LBUSD, at least, you're still all playing for Long Beach,
Yeah, but the neighborhoods in Long Beach are so different, really. It is kind of feeling like a different city sometimes when Compton comes to play Wilson.
Well, and certain other private schools in certain leagues, you sort of do need to list the player's hometown. Because
modern day boys basketball literally does that. And I was actually
exactly what I was.
I was just at Bishop Amont. I was just at Bishop Amont for the Lakewood Bishop Amont game. Name, weight, height, hometown, number, middle school.
Yeah.
For every single player that they listed their middle school.
That's interesting. Cool. That's interesting. I would agree with
boys basketball. Literally, will say like, this kid lives in Irvine, this kid lives in Fullerton, this kid lives
Carson,
in LA,
Compton.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of funny.
I would say I would agree with Mike because I think when you want to be at the successful programs because you get better coaching, so you would expect to get more out of what your capability would be to get that best coaching. You would get the exposure.
I think even aside from the scholarship stuff, in terms of education and experience, it's a different thing playing for Bosco football or Poly girls basketball or whatever.
Right, and the other thing about it is coaches at the next level like guys or gals that were in winning programs. They like to look and say, "Oh, this person."
But you're talking about if your child or the child we are speaking of theoretically were to have the ability to go to the next level. Let's say that kid doesn't have the ability to go to the next level, or maybe they're not interested in going to the next level. Do you think their high school experience would be better served to go to a smaller school than a bigger school if they were more interested in going somewhere for academics? Let's say.
I don't, just because I personally think, like I said, the experience of of being a part of that program teaches you its own thing. But aside from just like, okay, you're learning from perhaps a better coach or whatever, I personally think surrounding yourself with greatness and seeing what that's about and learning to compete with people who are better than you is more valuable than just, oh, I'm going to play at a smaller school and I'll get a lot of PT. Personally, I don't necessarily think that teaches you as much. We talked about that with Bree Mackey, who's at Long Beach State. She played at Reading High School, where, as Brian Gimilaro put it, no one was good enough to show her what she couldn't do, and she basically spent 4 years not developing as a volleyball player as a result.
But did she also develop
personality thing?
But did she also develop personality-wise as somebody who was the leader?
She needed
BMOC?
No, not according to her. Not according to her. She said she needed to get down here and not be the BMOC so that she could have a reason to have to challenge herself and grow. Because if you are a BMOC, well, I mean, that's always the joke, right? The high school jock who's like, that's the peak of his life. I mean, if you're not being forced to change and evolve, then the mind doesn't do that naturally, you know?
Well, but on the other side of it, you look at a kid like Rashad Penny, who's got this family legacy at a school like Norwalk. His older brothers, Robert and Elijah, play there.
Totally.
Yeah, and go on and get scholarships to these schools. But then now he comes in and has an amazing career, goes to San Diego State, has Pac-12 offers, all this kind of stuff, and rewrites their record books. So the Penny family is so ingrained at that school. So there's definitely a certain value in that.
And there's their own,
There's another Penny brother making his way up to Norwalk starting next year, so that will continue.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, and that's there's value in that too.
They've been on an upslope, so no pressure. You know, no pressure.
Feeling the pressure for sure, but it might be Shoddy that's the best one. We'll see.
No, it's fun to think about. It's fun to talk about because the more we cover high school sports, the more it changes. It seems not even just season to season. It's like sport to sport, day to day. Things are different now than they've ever been. We've got some big time playoff football games coming up on Friday that you can see the previews on Press Telegram and GazetteSports.com. But real quick, go around the horn, let them know where you're at. Mike, you are on the road to Crespi, where Poly is going to be taking on the Celts in a game that's got a lot of Jackrabbit fans nervous because this Celts team is very, very dangerous.
They're not as nervous as they should be, in my opinion, to be completely honest. I think this Poly team has been so good this year that there's an expectation that they'll get to a place where that level of team would normally get to, which is semifinal or championship game. But this Crespi team, the matchup for them isn't great for Poly. It's not a Poly team built to stop the run. Antonio Pierce, the head coach there, mentioned this Crespi team to us at Bracket Day for that reason. And so I'm kind of interested, but it also, not only is it a challenge for Poly's defense, which is built to stop the pass, it's also a challenge for their offense, because their offense is really built for a Corona Centennial or a Sarah game. They want to score a lot of points. They want to have a lot of possessions, and Crespi runs the ball so effectively, it might kind of take them out of the rhythm on both sides of the ball. So I think it's going to be a very challenging game for Poly.
Senior safety Marvell Tell is the guy to watch for Crespi. He's number 7. He starts at safety for them, pretty much going to be able to pick out of any Pac-12 school where he wants to go. But he was huge in their running game last week in the rout over Santa Margarita, so keep an eye on 7.
Yeah, Marvell, it ain't hard to tell. It's funny because you talk to Antonio Pierce, and it's a completely different conversation than you would ever have with a Poly head coach going into a playoff game, where he was saying,
the last 30 years at least.
I'm pretty confident we'll put up 35 points, and it's
going to be hard, but it's going to be
what?
But it's going to be hard to stop the run game.
Yeah,
right.
But it's like, what? I mean, so normally you would say if we can score 3 touchdowns, we should be fine, but that is not the case going into the game.
Right. You're almost guaranteed if you can score 3 touchdowns with the way their defenses have been for the last 12 years. But yeah, it's a different story over there. It's kind of been interesting.
So it's going to be a fascinating matchup. It's the game that AP was worried about when the brackets came out. So I mean, we'll see, because a win there likely sets it up for a rematch of the Fog Bowl because Bosco, people talked about how their road was pretty open for them to get to the semifinals, as they deserved, as they will travel to Norco, still scoring touchdowns, as they had that shootout with Ricky Town and St. Bonaventure winning that one.
Everybody had a shootout last week, man. It was crazy. I've never seen Pac-5 football scores like that.
Pretty much. Was it 71-70? Was that the final score of that game?
A basketball game.
Yeah, hooping it up. Bananas. So that'll be a long trip. And our guy Chris Trevino, who's not with the show today, but here in spirit, he will be out on the road at that game in Norco as the Braves just look to do what they do, and that's win football games.
Yeah, it is a road trip weekend, really, for us, most of us anyways. I am going to see St. Anthony take on Vasquez in the second round of the East Valley Division. St. Anthony winning their 10th game last year, first time they won 10 since 1948. And they're taking on a team, Vasquez, the last team to beat them on the field, theoretically, not counting that forfeit at Wilson. Week 1 at Vasquez, the lowest scoring game for St. Anthony this season. They were without Jalen Watson. Jalen Watson now back with the Saints. You can read about him in this week's Gazettes and GazetteSports.com. Great story by Ryan Zumalin. But that game should be interesting because Vasquez wants to run the ball. They've got a stable full of running backs, and I think big plays are going to be the difference. And that's what the Saints do. So hopefully they can get that big play action on the road going so they can come back home and play a big semifinal. Now, Tyler is going to be the closest one to home, and he's actually covering a team that we really didn't expect to be in the second round. Hey, guess what? This just didn't. We were wrong about football playoffs this year.
We were wrong, and it looked like we were kind of spot on with Norwalk the way they were playing for most of that game, but Cash ruled everything around him at the end of that ball game. The last few minutes, Cash Malawiya took over that game for Paramount and basically dragged them and the Norwalk defense right into the second round. And so now it's the Pirates who get to come home and host and set themselves up in a nice situation playing Crescenta Valley, an undefeated Crescenta Valley. So that's going to be a brutal test. But maybe the Pirates are just feeling that mojo. Sometimes that happens in the playoffs. Teams get hot.
Yeah. Is Cash going to be starting in that game?
I guess we'll find out. We don't know. That's the thing. He hasn't been starting at quarterback, but he put on quite a closer performance in that ball game. So we'll see. It's decision time. If it's up to me, I'd have Cash in from the jump. I'd have that automatic
you'd be
direct deposit.
What was the first thing I said when I came home from week 1 Paramount at Wilson?
This kid's special.
This kid's just special, man.
Yeah, what's for dinner?
Scores 5 touchdowns in his first varsity start and brings his team back to score 2 in the fourth quarter and win that ball game. Just give 7 the ball. Roll 7. That's what I say. Roll 7.
Roll Tide.
Way to cash, yeah.
If you want to follow all of that football playoff action on Friday, you follow us at PT Gazette Sports.
Some history made at Mount San Antonio College at the CIF cross-country prelims last week as the Poly girls cross-country team became the first Poly girls team to win their prelims heat. That qualified them for the CIF finals this Saturday. They will also be joined by the Poly boys team, the St. John Bosco boys team, and I believe both Warren boys and girls in the CIF finals. But the Jackrabbit girls, to me right now, are the story because they're trying to be the first Poly girls team to make it to state as a team. And as we all know, it's very hard to make history at that school, and they're doing it with 7 freshmen and sophomores, all 9th and 10th graders on that cross-country team. So we'll have live updates from that as well.
And we saw more league volleyball, and we really were excited with how Wilson was playing. We were going to have some upsets and some deep runs. The Bruins fell to the top seed Redondo Union, and then Lakewood, the 2 seed in the bracket, were upset in a 5-set thriller against CDM. But fear not, because the local volleyball talent, some of the top players, aren't exactly going anywhere. Sarah Miller and Megan Krudoff from Lakewood going to Long Beach State. I have a feature on Sarah Miller up on the Gazettes right now and in the Gazette newspaper on Thursday.
Great feature.
Thank you, Mike.
Tip my cap.
And Milan Stokes, the baller over at Wilson, is just a junior, so she'll be back next year as well. So a lot of volleyball talent staying local, even though the season ended earlier than we would have liked.
It's like that scene in Sports Night where they ask everybody what they think play of the year is, and the one guy goes, Peyton Manning. I feel like that guy, if somebody was like, hey, tell me about girls golf in the local area, and I'd just say, Ali Morallos. That's it. The sophomore is a top 10 golfer in California. Let me repeat that. The sophomore is now a top 10 golfer in California after finishing tied for 8th in the CIF state finals on Tuesday after an incredible performance re-upping her impressive performance on the front nine to survive a bumpy back nine in the regional and then survive a playoff. So a great, great performance from Ali Morallos. Not that anybody's surprised on that one.
Wilson on the cart path.
The best performance by a sophomore we've seen at the state level, I think, probably since Ariana Washington. Now that I'm considering it, really great to be top 10 as a sophomore is very tough.
It was a scene at Long Beach State last Saturday for homecoming. Long Beach State men's basketball making their home debut. Mike Caffey leading the way. Some guys you hadn't heard of in a while, like Michaela Sau, also playing very well for that team. But I think what everybody came away from that event saying was, wow, that looks like a real basketball school.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a completely different college than the one that JJ and I attended, at least, because when we were there, homecoming was, I don't know, it was barely even called that, to be honest. There was no one there.
Homecoming was us sneaking beer in Gatorade bottles to the grass to play bocce ball.
Basically, it just wasn't really this big thing. And Dan Munson commented on it. He said it's really cool to see what this has turned into, because homecoming at colleges that don't have football teams is not really usually that kind of an event. But they've now sold this thing out multiple years in a row. The attendance is great. The action outside the pyramid is almost as fun. You know, they've got all the fraternities out. They've got the alumni groups. They've got a little historical display, which I think is cool. It's just like you said. It's a fun time. It's a show. And I don't know. I think it's really cool to see it happening. I think you can almost, aside from all the other success Dan Munson has had, kind of put a circle around that homecoming experience and say, to me at least, it makes me feel like I'm an alumni from a school with like a legitimate athletic tradition, which I think really they sort of lost touch with over the last 20 years or so.
No doubt, because a lot of the teams that were good were not gate teams. It's very difficult to schedule something like a homecoming for a baseball team.
You don't have a homecoming baseball game or women's
It's perfect to have it in the fall when other football games are on. You can watch football games outside as if you were tailgating. So it still does have that. And then the video board in the pyramid, when those starting lineups on Saturday got going and everybody started cheering and everybody's clapping along with the music, I think that was the moment where that you're talking about, where it did feel like an athletic tradition that you didn't have to force, that it just felt right.
Right, that was the crown jewel of homecoming, was that video board, and the graphics are so on point and so professional, and they did a great job with the camera work and everything, adding the added element of the replay, and people can go to the games and see themselves on the big board, and even though you're already seeing when you're at the pyramid, it just adds a new dimension and makes you feel like you're at a professional arena. And so the fan experience just got that much better, especially with Kiss Cam and everything else that they're going to do.
Kiss Cam changes everything, Tyler.
Oh, it's an absolute game changer, y'all. I just hope that we don't end up on it next to each other. We're going to have to make some awkward decisions. But also when they
I'll just make out with my camera.
I mean, turn up. Wouldn't be the first time. But they moved those banners that they had that were covering those offices. They covered the staircases, which made everything feel more enclosed.
It's almost as big a deal in terms of the space as the video. The video board adds the element of what's on it, obviously. But yes, it no longer has that feeling of you're in a big empty hangar. Right. It now feels like a designed arena.
It's not as cavernous. And the other thing that I think I would like to reference and point out is the fact that students now just know that they go to basketball games.
Right.
That like students that come in and the seniors
free stuff anymore.
Right. They just kind of know it's like, oh, it's basketball season, it's homecoming. Well, obviously, or we got to come back to the next one. And so that student section is so self-sustaining at this point because all those kids are so used to just going to basketball games. Oh, the men's basketball team has a home game.
They know the
schedule. We're going to the pyramid. They know the schedule.
It's on the parking garage. No, when JJ and I were in college, they literally used to give you free stuff to go to basketball games because they knew
pizza
if we didn't.
When they started the Maniacs, that's what it was. It was like, oh, well, we get a free shirt and get free pizza. So it's like, all right, I'll show up.
I guess I'll go to a couple games.
Yeah, and there's like 30 people that were there because they were hungry or whatever. But now it's just, they moved them behind the bucket. They got the signs and everything. They always add a new meme back there. They got the Kevin Hart face, which is hilarious.
Yes.
And so it's really just sort of built itself.
Emoji, which I like quite a bit.
It's killer. It's killer. It's killer.
As usual, it's the men's basketball team that's going to get most of the attention and attendance, but the women's basketball team really off to a phenomenal start. 2-0 for the first time since 2004-2005. with a win over Seattle and San Diego State. And they're actually going to have a doubleheader on Friday before the men play Kansas State. The women are hosting USC. Interesting sort of story for Jody Wynn there, the head coach at Long Beach State. She was previously at USC. So she's going to see some familiar faces. And USC transfer Khadijah Southall, Poly alum, will also be interested to look down the line and see some of her former teammates. So big game for them. Obviously, that's starting at 4:30, and then the men's basketball game will start at 7:30 or a little bit later if the women's game goes long.
We always ask you to get in touch with us on all of the social media as well as leaving a comment on the website. People did, and we put it in the paper this week. Gave you all the things you needed to know about why the Moore League and LBUSD has been going through all of these forfeits last week. People responded to it, and we put that in the Gazette this week.
It's nice to have people reach out. This was obviously, we did this story as a conversation piece, expecting to hear some feedback about it, and we did. I'll let you read the story to see the sort of commentary people had on it. But I actually think it's good. You legitimately have a community of people who care about their high school athletics, coming up with ideas and brainstorming ways to improve the situation, which is what it's going to need because it's not an easy fix.
And even though people think we're big time and we should work for ESPN and this and that, this is a community paper. And so you can be involved and get your voice heard through us. We are your pathway to stardom, candidly.
Hashtag humblebrag.
No doubt. And you can get that young follow back, perhaps, if you even ask for it.
Oof. With a side of some Aquafina. LBCC football season not done, and they are a little unhappy about it because they are relegated to a bowl game
rather than as they should be,
rather than the state playoffs. Gotta quickly spend some time. They beat Mount Sac head-to-head, had the same record, and yet Mount Sac goes to the state playoffs. Really stunning decision by the SCFA. So gonna have to look into that one. A real head scratcher. So LBCC is planning to kind of put hands on Golden West on Saturday, to be completely frank with you.
Yeah, they're laying hands on them, and not in a healing way, I think.
You
Absolutely not.
Frank, just be mad.
No, they're gonna be in bad hands, no All-State, because LBCC is upset, and the trash talking's already started on Twitter, which is never a good idea. So that's Saturday in the Beach Bowl, which is an awesome title for a game.
Indeed.
And also the Hall of Champions added its 14th class, fitting for the year. A great class of people, including friend of the website, Joe Carlson.
Great friend of the show and the website,
Absolutely.
Joe Carlson.
GFOP.
Very excited for Joe, and obviously the rest of the alumni. Tommy Peel as well, somebody that we know. So very cool. But Joe's someone who's been a big help to us over the years. A big fan from day one when JJ and I were at lbpostsports.com, actually, what feels like forever ago. So congrats to him and the rest of that class.
lbpostsports.com reference. Throwback Thursday, baby. That's it. That's all. There ain't no more. Another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk in the books. Obviously, like we've said, these fall CIF playoffs are wrapping up, and you know what that means.
Winter is coming.
Dude, let's bookend every episode with a Game of Thrones reference.
It's less of a catchphrase, but I'd actually say winter is practically here, because if you're listening to the show on Thursday or over the weekend, Monday, November 24th, starts the high school winter sports season, which means basketball, soccer, water polo, wrestling, everything's getting going in the winter. We will be out. We're going to spend a lot of time in Redondo next week, Thanksgiving week, for the Pac Shores tournament, the annual kickoff for our local teams to basketball season. We're going to have Poly and Compton and Bosco over there. So big time tournament there, and obviously I guess we'll have to start talking about basketball next week.
It's never too early. For everybody involved in the Press Telegram and GazetteSports.com and the Grunion Gazette and this show, thank you for everybody else, like Mike and Tyler and Chris and Vinny and JJ and all those other guys. They're all right, too.
For yourself?
We'll see you guys in the stands this weekend. Wish us a happy road trip this weekend. It's tough, man.
You gotta work on
the road again.
so much. No. Not .com.
God damn it. Stop laughing and distracting me.
Sorry.